Remember WWJD? What would Jesus do? Any of you still have an armband or a trucker hat or a t-shirt? Perhaps that was helpful in certain things to help us to focus and simplify our thinking if we were trying to make a decision. What would Jesus do in this circumstance? But often that was just a little too simple in face of certain complex issues. And I remember shortly afterwards, someone came out with WWJD, what would Jesus drive? And of course the discussion there is between a gas-guzzling vehicle and a fuel-efficient one. What would Jesus drive? Jesus wouldn't drive at all. He would walk, right? That's how I would answer that. And then an even more thoughtful question, WWJB. Who would Jesus bomb? Now that would really lead into some interesting discussions about how we as Christians are to emulate Jesus and what kind of a stand do we take on violence in the world. And then, of course, there were the inane spin-offs, WWWD. What would Willie do, right? Willie Nelson. Maybe a savior figure to some people, I don't know. Well, I thought all of this had faded away until the other day I was behind a car, and in the back window was a very large, recognizable cartoon dog. And in large letters next to it, it said, "What would Scooby do?" So clearly this meme is still alive and well and working its way through our culture. So I'll just give it a little more life this morning and ask WWJE, what would Jesus eat? Why not? This is our last worship service before Lent begins. And maybe this is a good time to give you some food for thought, or maybe some thought for food, before Lent starts. Maybe you've already given some thought to your Lenten discipline, maybe not. But trying to plan your Lenten discipline on Ash Wednesday is kind of like running out to buy your presents on Christmas Eve. It may be too late if you wait until Wednesday. So let's do a little bit of thinking ahead of time. If you were an observant Jew or an observant Muslim, you would have kosher and halal regulations that would very clearly lay out for you what you could eat and at different times of the year, how you would eat in different times of the day. Some Hindus and Buddhists are vegetarian, not all, but the ones who are for religious reasons. And there are certainly some Roman Catholic and Eastern Orthodox Christians who follow strict dietary restrictions, either during Lent or other times of the year, and that becomes a very important part of their spiritual discipline. But when it comes to Protestant Christianity and the Episcopal Church, we don't usually have much guidance to offer about eating, except for the possibility of doing a little bit of fasting or giving up a particular kind of food during Lent. It is odd, though, if you think about it. It seems as if we assume that something as basic as eating does not have a central place in our spiritual lives, but it certainly should, and throughout the year. But Lent's always a good time to try something out and see how it works. Now, I don't have any particular regimen to suggest to you, nor am I going to say what I think you should or shouldn't eat. I think you're smart people. You can figure out details for yourselves. But I do want to invite you into prayerful consideration during Lent of these four things: why you are eating, what you are eating, where you are eating, and how you are eating. And to consider that the choices that you make in each of these four areas can be a very active and influential part of your spiritual life. I mean, you've got to eat anyway, right? 1, 2, 3, or more times a day. So since you're going to be doing that anyway during Lent, without having to add any additional times, you can focus during your meal into making those times of the day perhaps more spiritual moments turn those times of the day into holy eating. So first, the why. We eat to satisfy hunger, to sustain life, to stay healthy. Those are the physical reasons. Holy eating considers spiritual reasons also. We eat in order to take care of the body which has been given to us. And like everything else in creation, our bodies don't belong to us. They belong to God. We are the stewards of something that doesn't belong to us. And so as stewards, we must do what is best for our bodies. And only if we take good care of our bodies can we really carry out the mission that God has given us, each of us as individual Christians, to do. If we're not well, we can't get up and do what God needs us to do. Recognize also that sometimes we eat not because we are physically hungry. Sometimes we eat because we're emotionally hungry or because we are spiritually hungry. And if you recognize that that is so, try not to fill those voids with food, but try to fill them with something that meets the emotional need, something that meets the spiritual need instead. So every time you eat, consider as a spiritual question, why am I eating? Next, what? Much of what we may choose to eat may be out of mere habit or out of convenience. Holy eating considers the miracle and mystery of any food. Maybe it's plant, maybe it's animal, maybe it's mineral, maybe it's some ingredient that can't be classified or even identified. But that food, whatever it is we eat, becomes part of our body. We are what we eat. And what we eat either gives us energy or saps our energy. It leads us to health or it leads us away from health. It influences how we feel about ourselves. It influences how we feel about other people. Food is holy as a gift from God. And if we treat food as if it's not holy, we've desecrated it. We've taken something holy and made it no longer holy. So also consider how much we eat versus how much we need to eat. And think how much we in our society tend to eat compared to how much less many people in the rest of the world ever get to eat. And recognize that our food choices don't only affect our bodies, but the food choices that we make have ripple effects throughout the world and do have significant effects on what other people have available for them to eat or don't have available to eat. So every time you eat, consider as a spiritual question, what am I eating? Next, where? We can choose places that are conducive to holy eating, or we can choose places that distract us from holy eating. Are we choosing to eat alone or with someone else? Are we eating a meal with someone in order to strengthen that relationship? It's hard to eat prayerfully in front of the television. It's hard to eat socially with another person if you have a newspaper or an electronic device between you and that other person. Sometimes the people that we're eating with can be a big help. You may have noticed how much harder it is to exercise willpower if you're on your own, although sometimes it happens that someone else may be leading us into food temptation. So be careful how you're led. And every time you eat, consider as a spiritual question, where am I eating? Finally, how? In what frame of mind, in what frame of heart, in what frame of soul are we eating? Holy eating is prayerful eating. Certainly we might think of praying before we eat, but do you ever think of praying in thanksgiving after you eat? Or do you think of praying while you're eating? Maybe it doesn't have to be out loud. You can be praying in your head. We can think and talk and pray about God's bounty as we're eating a meal. If we eat a meal slowly and deliberately, that gives us time time to reflect upon and be thankful for this gift of the church also. If we eat in remembrance of Christ, any and every meal can be a communion-like sacrament. Another name for the altar in our church is the holy table. By asking ourselves at every meal, am I eating this meal with spiritual awareness? Is this holy eating that I'm doing now? If we ask ourselves those questions, we can make every kitchen table, every picnic table, every restaurant table, every dining room table, any table that you're eating at, you can turn that table into another holy table where you are celebrating the sacrament of communion with a different kind of food that God is feeding you.